My name is Brian Sexton. I'm here with MPN's Power Player. Today I'm joined in the studio by Kathy Peterson from Voltz Power. Kathy, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Kathy, would you mind sharing with me a little bit of your background, your history, and what's brought you to this stage in your career with Volt?
So I kind of stumbled into the power sports industry. I was looking for a job when I was about 19 years old, and I found a cashier's job at a motorcycle shop. And I was there for about 2 years, and the parts manager really liked me. He saw that I could learn really, really fast, and he promoted me to the parts department. From there, I met a regional distributor that hired me, and he was just kind of starting out. I worked for him for 16 years. When I started, I was the only person that worked there. When I left, I had 20 people underneath me. I was his GM. And then I went to work for a battery company, because we sold batteries there as well. I went to work for a battery company, worked there for about 5 years, went to work at another battery company that didn't even have a power sport program, started the program, built it up for 14 years. Unfortunately, the person that owned that company died from cancer, and it got sold to an investment group. And so I didn't know what I was going to do. I was like, oh my God, this is all I've ever done. And somebody I met from the battery industry, we also sold very heavily there as well as into the power sports industry, came to me and said, I have a really good idea. Let's start a company. And he said, if you come in and work the business, I'll go to the bank and get a line of credit. You work the business, and I'll give you 49% of the business. And that was 5 years ago. We started out, it was scary, but now we're doing really, really good. We've got a lot of distributors in the power sports industry. We're selling very heavily into the battery industry, which is the other segment of our business, and it's just been really great.
That was quite a story. Now, the past couple of years, I think we've all heard a lot about supply chain being interrupted. What sort of challenges have you been seeing on your end?
Well, it's been horrible. I mean, in the very beginning, COVID was a big factor, and it was a factor at our factory. Our factory got shut down for 8 weeks, not because they had a breakout in their factory, but because there were factories around them that had breakouts. Mm-hmm. So for 8 weeks, we couldn't get anything. We had a ton of containers that were supposed to come in. We couldn't get anything. Then all of a sudden, they could build everything. So they start taking things to the port. And the next chapter in that is that at the port, there were no sailings. All sailings were getting canceled. So our factory would take a container to the port, drop it off. Next week, take a container to the port, drop it off. Pretty soon we had 7 to 10 containers sitting at the port that we couldn't get out. So then they would get put on one ship. So then they would come over, and all of a sudden, instead of getting 1 container at a time, we're getting 7 containers at a time. Well, we have 2 warehouses. We have one in California, and we have one in Minneapolis. All of a sudden, rail service got suspended. So we couldn't take anything to Minneapolis. So everything had to go to California. We had to break it down. We kept some stuff there. Then we took stuff to Minneapolis. But it's been a challenge. It wasn't just a challenge for us, but it's been a challenge for everybody out there. It's just been horrible. It's better now, but there's still a few challenges out there. It's just not 100% better yet. And it's not back to what it was before, pre-COVID.
Yeah, I would say that's a pretty familiar story to a lot of people who are in our industry. What other sorts of challenges have you been seeing on your end?
I think a lot. We had a situation. We had a situation with the tariff. We produce our batteries in China, and that's been very difficult for us too. All of a sudden, it's costing us 25% more in duty to bring the product in. And sometimes that's really difficult for customers. Sometimes it isn't. We've chose to stay with the factory that we're with because the quality is really, really good. And it's not always easy for them to go somewhere else and just break ground and build another factory. So that's been a challenge as well, the pricing.
Yeah, and sometimes if it's not broke, don't fix it.
Exactly.
So what would you say is the way to be sure of the authenticity, the quality of products these days?
It's hard because of this whole issue with the tariff and this whole issue with supply chain issues. I think a lot of suppliers have been forced to go other places looking for product, and they're not always getting what they got before. And it's not necessarily their fault. It's just the nature of the business. We're very fortunate that we've had a relationship with the factory we use here at Voltz Power, as well as the company I used to work for over 20 years. So they've always taken really, really good care of us and made sure that we've gotten all of our products to the best of their ability. The COVID shutdown, there's nothing they could do about that. And that all of our containers sitting at the port, there's nothing they can do about that. But they've been able to produce batteries, quickly for us. I think there's other people out there that have had issues where their factories can't produce the batteries, and they're forced to go different places. And when you're forced to go different places, you don't always know if the quality is going to be as good as what you're used to.
Yeah, sometimes you have to wait for that first QI order to see
Exactly.
what's coming.
And then sometimes it's too late.
Yep.
Yep.
Yep. And it's hard to meet deadlines when you're waiting on that first
Exactly.
batch.
Exactly.
Exactly. Now, you mentioned that you've been sticking with the same factory for quite a while. How long have you been?
I've been working with this factory for over 20 years, 14 years at the previous company I worked for, and almost 6 years here. A lot of it is because of the quality. They're an OEM supplier in the Asian markets to Suzuki, Kawasaki, and Honda, and they actually are OEM to some of the smaller Polaris models here in the United States.
Very good. So never underestimate the value of a good relationship.
Exactly.
So a lot of us know a battery has to live a pretty harsh life.
Mm-hmm.
What can you tell me about what a Powersports battery has to be able to stand up to?
Okay, so you're putting this battery in a really small area, and there's a lot of heat from the engine, more so than the heat from an automotive engine. And there's a lot of banging around going on, and so those plates and separators tend to break down a lot faster than an automotive battery. So I tell people all the time, if you can get 2 years life out of a battery, that's great. I've got the guys that have told me, oh, I've had your battery in my bike for 10 years and it's great. Well, that's kind of like the light bulb in the firehouse that was there for 99 years. You're just really, really lucky. Mm-hmm. But if you get 2 to 3 years out of a Powersport battery, you're doing really, really good just because of the abuse it does go through.
And if it's not a daily driver, especially north of the Rust Belt where bikes aren't riding all year, this is something that's being left alone for months on end and not being charged.
Exactly. And we try to educate our customers and we tell them, hey, you need to put it on a tender if you're not going to use it for more than a couple weeks. And that's great, but not everybody does that. And then they don't understand why their bike doesn't start. So it's really, really, really important if you're not going to ride your bike for over a 2-week period that you really, really should keep it on a tender.
Yeah, there's nothing more disappointing than being completely geared up and turning that key to the sound of a starter click.
Yeah, you're ready to go and you're not going to go.
Is there anything else that you'd really like to share with our audience here this afternoon?
You know, a lot of our sales, people came by and saw us at AIM. And a lot of our sales aren't to the big guys like Tucker Rocky and Parts Unlimited and Western, which are great companies. But we work a lot with the smaller wholesale distributors. And if you can't find it from the bigger guys, reach out to these guys because they're great. And they really focus on products like ours, other products out there, and they do a really, really, really good job.
Kathy, this has been a real pleasure. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me and talking about our batteries.
All right, my guest today has been Kathy Peterson from Voltz Power. My name is Brian Sexton with MPN's Power Player. Thank you so much for watching.